Hey everyone, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am Aaron Freeman, founder of FalcFans.com. I'm joined by my co-host and partner, Scott Karasik, who covers the Falcons for Pro Football Spot. This week we are talking about the Atlanta Falcons' Week 1 win over the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football. We'll be previewing the Falcons' Week 2 matchup against the New York Giants later in the show. We'll be talking about the Jake Long signing as well. And then, as usual, we'll be answering your mailbag questions at the end of the show. And with us this week, we have none other than our friend. I think this is what, your third or fourth appearance on this show, Charles? You know, you might be wearing out your welcome a little bit. But we got Charles McDonald, recent addition to the Falcoholic, formerly of Football Savages, formerly of like 13 other sites. Charles is writing Falcon stuff and draft stuff pretty much anywhere over the last couple of months. But welcome back to the show this week, Charles.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about a good Falcons win.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we usually, before we get into that game, let's talk a little bit about the roster move that the Falcons made today. They signed Jake Long, free agent offensive tackle. They cut Charles Godfrey. I think Long got a one-year deal. I haven't checked in the last few hours to see if we got a contract update on that, but pretty much Dan Quinn said in his press conference announcing the deal that they signed Long to be depth. He's going to play left tackle at first, then he'll move him over to right tackle eventually. I think Long has basically not played right tackle since his sophomore year at Michigan, like a decade ago. So, you know, obviously that takes a little bit of a transition. But what are your guys' thoughts on Jake Long's addition to the team, and what do you see his role? Do you believe that Dan Quinn, he's just basically going to be a swing tackle?
Yes, I think he's a swing tackle. I don't think he was signed for anything but swing tackle. I didn't see anything wrong with what Schrader did this past week. I thought he looked solid in the run game. I thought he looked solid in the pass protection. In the run game, he had some issues. He wasn't getting to the outside shoulder as well as you'd want him to. But he's still learning. He's still a young guy. I would much rather see Schrader and take lumps to Schrader than put in Jake Long coming off an injury.
Okay. Charles, how do you feel about Long?
Yeah, I think he's probably just a swing tackle. I mean, I don't even know at this point in his career that he can even be counted on to like start a couple games because his knees they're just not holding up anymore. So yeah, but if Matthews has to come out for a few plays or Schrader has to come out for a few plays, and you know Jake Long is your backup, like that's a really good quality backup to have. And I don't think he's pushing for a starting spot just yet, but to have Jake Long as your swing tackle, that's a great addition in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Long is going to start off as a swing tackle, but I do think there's a chance that Schrader does, if he doesn't continue to play at a acceptable level, I think there's a chance that he could lose his job. You know, we talk a lot about that Dolphin preseason game where the Falcons' offensive line looked terrible, and we talked about it, you know, a couple of weeks ago. But it's one of those things where everybody came out of that game saying, "Oh, James Stone's terrible. There's no reason for him to be a starter," and the Falcons subsequently obviously made moves to make that the case. But I think if they're looking at it in the same sort of frame of mind, they probably look at Schrader in that game and was like, yeah, you know, I think he was arguably worse than James Stone was in that game, but they couldn't really make a move at tackle because their backup tackle was Tyler Columbus at that time, so there wasn't really an obvious player that they could bench him for. Now, since then, we've seen them add Bryce Harris, we've seen them add Jake Long, not necessarily because they're going to immediately start Jake Long or whatever, but I do think the Falcons are putting themselves in a situation where if Schrader does struggle like that again, they have an alternative like they didn't have a couple of weeks ago with Jake Long. So, you know, hopefully, I'm a big fan of Ryan Schrader, but hopefully he'll maintain his starting spot. But I do think there is a chance that, you know, a month from now, Jake Long could be starting at right tackle for the Falcons.
And hopefully, if he has to, it's an upgrade and not a downgrade like it looks like it would be.
I think Long still's got a little bit left in the tank. Whether he fits in the scheme, we'll see, because when Philbin took over in Miami, he was bringing in more of a zone blocking scheme, and they kind of were like, yeah, you're not a great fit in the scheme. So we'll see what has changed, in the last 3 or 4 years. But I think a healthy Jake Long is better than Ryan Schrader, but it's probably not by a huge degree. All right. That's how we'll leave that. So let's talk about the Eagles game. The Falcons won 26-24. Where do we start? Obviously Julio Jones is probably the MVP of the game. But who else stood out to you guys?
Avenel, Grady Jarrett. I mean, just that defensive line rotation actually creating pressure. They didn't get a sack, but when you hit a guy 8 times and you force 2 bad throws to get interceptions, I'll take it. That's what Mike Smith meant when he said sacks are overrated. Because as a whole, sacks kind of are overrated. But you still got to get the pressure to force bad throws, to force incompletions. On third down, Atlanta, this is the stat to measure pass rush out of more than anything else. On third down passing plays, Atlanta allowed, I think it was 2 out of 11 to get converted. That's insanity. That's what you want. Or it was 2 out of 10.
Yeah, I don't really believe you, Scott, because that would mean the Falcons have a good third down defense, and I've never seen that before.
They only allowed 3 out of 12 all game.
Yeah, it's amazing, amazing. Yeah. So Charles, who were some of the guys that stood out to you? I'm sorry.
I was really impressed with O'Brien Schofield yesterday. He played out of his damn mind, especially in the first half. He was going off. Like, he was in the backfield disrupting. I remember early on that DeMarco Murray 12-yard loss on the first or second drive. He really caused that by setting the edge and getting back there. But he played really well. I thought Hagman had a really good game. When he was in, he was dominating on the interior, making it tough for them to run those inside zone plays. And outside of the third quarter, I thought Justin Durant had a really good game too. Overall, I was really impressed with the Falcons' defense. And on the offensive side, I thought Chris Chester played really well. He played a lot better than I expected him to. He looks like he's going to pick up right where he left off from Washington and to be a above average starting guard for this offense. And that's all you really can ask for at this point. I was happy.
What are your thoughts on your boy Vic Beasley and his performance against Jason? I know he was catching a lot of flack from some people on Twitter during the game because he wasn't getting sacks and beating Peters. And I was like, I think Scott and I were, when we first drafted him and we were talking about the schedule, I think when we talked to you earlier, we were like, yeah he's going to play some really good tackles at the beginning of the year, so he may not get 6 sacks the first couple of games. But what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I went on Bleeding Green radio, the Eagles SB Nation site, and we were just talking about my expectations for Beasley going into the game. And I wasn't expecting much, to be honest, because Peters is, if you wanted to, you could make a case for Peters to go into the Hall of Fame once he wraps it up. So I wasn't expecting much, but I thought he played well for his first game yesterday. He held up better than expected in the running game, even though he still got driven back a few times, but that's expected given his weight and playing experience. But the one play that got me, the 2 plays that got me excited was when he beat Peters on the speed rush and hit Bradford before he got the ball out, and then the one pass deflection they got on third down. So he had a tough test. He had a tough test for his first NFL game, but I thought he rose to the occasion for the most part, and I'm really looking forward to him dominating Eric Flowers next week for Week 2 versus the Giants.
Flowers might even play, I heard.
Even better.
Yeah. If you're the backup to Eric Flowers, that probably means you're not very good. Yeah, I thought defensively, I don't think there was any really, standout bad performances on defense. I know, Corey Bierman had a couple of lapses, but you know,
I mean, like with Bierman, like I'm not even too mad at him. Like, how many times is Bierman going to win in space for Darren Sproles? Like, that's just a bad matchup. I would put that more on him being in a bad situation to lose than anything really on that's his fault, you know?
yeah. I mean, I can think back. What was it? I think it was like '08 or something like that, where there was a play where Reggie Bush was one-on-one against like Keith Brooking out in the flat in a very similar situation. And I remember Brooking looked terrible, but it was just like, yeah, you know, that's Reggie Bush at his height. That's Keith Brooking at the end of his career. I mean, basically, Bierman's in the exact same situation. I know Sproles isn't, you know, the youngest guy anymore, but he's still Darren Sproles.
Right.
And he was the one guy that really gave me worry with this Eagles offense because I figured like most of the other guys we can handle defensively, but Sproles getting out in space with, you know, guys like Brooking covering that flat, that's, you know, that's a recipe for disaster. Sproles made some big plays, but I thought we did for the most part, particularly early, were able to contain him and others and made it so that some of their playmakers really didn't have an impact. You know, Aguilar might as well not have played in the game, you know, with the way Trufant was locking him down. So great performance for the Falcons defense. Certainly coming out stronger early in that game than I expected. Ricardo Allen was amazing. Picked up right where he left off at the end of the preseason. Nice to see Willie Moe out there getting fine, you know, lowering on people. You know, Paul Warlow made plays at the end of the game. You know, big third down stop for him. Overall, just a great defensive performance for the Falcons. Fast and physical. So, guys, anybody on offense stand out to you guys?
Ooh. Yeah, Julio Jones, obviously, but Tevin Coleman.
Other than Julio.
I was sitting there because I went to the Stars and Stripes things with the Falcoholic, and I didn't realize this, but Steven Jackson had a lot of negative runs last year. And Tevin Coleman, just by gaining, I don't know, 2-3 yards consistently, how much that changes the offense. Like, he was consistently gaining 3 yards. Even on his bad plays, he was gaining 3 yards. So, you know, yeah, we're going to see a lot of 3-4, 3-4, 3-4, and then 20. But I'm okay with that. That's what Warwick Dunn gave the Falcons for basically 3 years.
Roddy White had a pretty good game. You know, he had some big catches. I wouldn't take him back or anything. Like, he's not Roddy of old, but, you know, he got some opportunities with the play action and Julio pulling coverages away from him. And, you know, that play action cross that the Falcons ran a couple of times, you know, the Eagles really had nothing that could handle it. And Roddy came up big on those drives, and those really helped the Falcons put some points on the board. Yeah, you know, and the running game wasn't great. It wasn't dominant, but I don't think I expected it to be. I thought, considering who we were playing with the Eagles in their front seven, and given the questions with our offensive line, the fact that we even got as many yards as we did, we got 100 yards, which is like, I think the first time in like 6 games that the Falcons have gotten 100 yards total on the ground. You know, Matt Ryan even contributed there. So, you know, it was a very positive performance for the running game, not dominant, but, you know, the key is basically, can we have some sort of balance? And we did that. I think, what was it, like 34 runs and 34 passes or something like that at the end of the game? So
yeah, it was something balanced like that.
Yeah. What were you guys' thoughts on Matt Ryan's performance? I know a lot of people were critical of Matt during and after the game.
I mean, he can play better than that. Like, he threw 2 picks, but if we're being real, it could have been 3 or 4. But I think he's still adjusting to what Kyle Shanahan wants to do, because if we go back to the preseason, he had one series versus Tennessee, 2 or 3 series versus the Jets, and then he got pulled early in that Miami game because Sewell or Mitchell were getting to the passer so easily. So he never really had a chance to gel with the offense during the preseason. I think that's a big reason why he struggled last night. Um, the pass protection was pretty good if we're going to be realistic. They held up pretty well against a pass rush that was supposed to, come in and kick our ass, but the O-line held up well. I just think Matt Ryan's going to need a little bit more time to get in groove with this offense, but yeah, he wasn't great last night, and I think he's only going to get better as he gets more comfortable with what Shanahan's asking him to do.
And if the center learns how to fucking snap.
Yeah, that was the issue too. With Person.
Mike Person has no business on an NFL field.
That's how you really feel, Scott.
Mike Person has no business on an NFL field. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Parsons and I were talking about this last night. Like, literally, the only thing Person can do is move. Like, he's a good athlete, but he can't really do anything else. Like, he's not a great blocker. He can't snap the ball. So, I think I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in somebody like during the season to, give Person a little run for his money at center position.
I don't understand why they don't just put James Stone in. Stone's not your best option, but he's still better than whatever the hell Person is.
I don't know. The Falcons really like Person. I mean, they basically were going to start him over Joe Hawley.
Which is stupid.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't watched it all 22, so I'll have to see. But, I think he had a couple bad plays, but considering, Benny Logan is no slouch, and, I think we tend to heighten a couple of bad snaps here and there more than probably most do because we're Falcon fans and we haven't seen a good offensive line in like 5 years. And even the offensive line that we claim to be good, the 2010 group, really wasn't as good as we say. It's just the other ones have been so bad since then that we sort of put that one on a pedestal. I thought it was okay. Obviously, he can get better. We'll see how these guys gel. Hopefully, things will work better in the future. But, as long as they're not terrible, competent, average, that's what I'll take with this group, with this kind of piecemeal offensive line right now. And I think Person has a chance to do that, but we'll see.
Let's hope Person doesn't suck it up.
So, I've heard Scott throw out a bunch of options, Joplin, Bartu, among others. Charles, do you think there's any options for the Falcons beyond Croy Bierman playing that strong side linebacker?
I think you can just stick Schofield there and be fine. Like, I don't know how much he's going to offer, how much more he's going to offer than Croy Bierman in pass coverage, but at least you're getting somebody who can set the edge and play the run well and really get after the passer. So if you're checking off 2 of the 3 boxes that this scheme asks for in the strong side linebackers, that's fine. Like, I'm not even sure realistically how good in pass coverage Brooks Reed is. So if we can get somebody to just hold down, stop the run, first and second down, and pin your ears back on third, that's fine with me. I don't know if there's anybody out there in free agency or anybody we can trade for that's going to be better than what Schofield can do. So I would really just give the reins to Schofield and kind of put Bierman back into that backup rotational Leo role that he's more suited for.
Are you worried at all that if Schofield was pulling double duty both at linebacker and defensive end, he would wear down?
Yeah, maybe, because it's not it's not really a workload that he's had in his entire career. He came out of Wisconsin, and right after he got, I don't remember if he was drafted or undrafted, but he's had some injury problems throughout his career. So I don't know if he's ready to do double time duty at Leo and strong side backer. But if you just focus him as strong side backer, I think he's probably a starting caliber player there.
Yeah, I think it would work. The one thing I worry is how thin our depth is at both of those spots at D end and outside linebacker. It kind of feels like if you want to maximize Schofield's pass rush, then you kind of put him in that position, what he is right now, as that sort of nickel situational guy. And if we had another option at D end, Mapanga maybe. That would give you a better option than Bierman there in that role, then I'd probably be more in favor. I think kind of the Falcons are just kind of have to just, grit their teeth and bear it with Bierman for the next month until Brooks Reed comes back because, I think Bartu certainly is capable of making more plays in space than Bierman is, but I don't necessarily really trust Bartu right now in terms of knowing what he's supposed to do in coverage. Maybe he could be better, but I haven't seen anything as of yet right now that makes me feel like, oh, he'll definitely be better. But it's one of those things with Bierman. You could certainly say that Bierman's so bad that nobody could be worse.
Right.
Role at linebacker. I'm not an anti-Croy Bierman guy, but he has no business really playing linebacker. When you drop him in space and ask him to make plays, he's just not going to do it. And it wasn't that huge a deal against the Eagles. I think because we were playing so much nickel, and so he was mostly playing D end throughout the night. But it might be a bigger issue against the Giants with someone like Shane Vereen, and we'll probably end up playing a lot more base defense against them than we did this past week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think the Falcons are just kind of stuck in this situation. A lot of these areas of the roster, they just don't have a lot of depth, and they're just going to have to make do with what they got right now.
I just don't want to see Bierman out there trying to cover a guy like Darren Sproles in the flat ever again.
Well, luckily, we don't have to play Darren Sproles twice a year anymore, so that's a positive.
Yeah, but hopefully CJ Spiller's hurt near the end of the year, so we don't have to see him. Because Spiller would destroy Darren Sproles. Or not Darren Sproles, would destroy Bierman way worse than Sproles did. Way worse.
It's going to be fun, guys. It's going to be fun. Hopefully by then Brooks Reed is back, though. So you don't have to worry about it.
Prostate exam is.
Okay. So you guys have anything else you want to add about this Eagles game before we talk a little bit about the Giants?
It was nice seeing a team play with some fire for once, instead of the whole Mike Smith style, like, hey, we're kind of good, I think, confidence, instead of last night they played inspired football for pretty much the entire time. It was, hey, let's go out there and bust some heads. Hey, let's go out there and, fuck some shit up. So, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, those guys, like, it's a dumb, like, football term, but, like, they had the dog in them. Like, they had that rabid dog in them. Like, they were really out to hurt people. And that's just something that we haven't seen in the Mike Smith era. And I'm glad that, Dan Quinn has kind of lit the fire in their ass, and they're revving up and they're ready to go. Like, even Hagman, who's somebody people have said that, this is a guy who could be great, but he's had work ethic problems in the past. He was kicking ass on the inside, with the Eagles' new guards, and even Kelsey a little bit. He was playing really well. And what really stood out to me was, like, even especially in the first half, you could hear the collisions, like, as they were coming hard downhill, and just popping DeMarco Murray, offensive line. It was real football. It was a beautiful thing to see. And I think once we play a team that's not pushing tempo and fast pace all the time, I think we're going to get 4 quarters of that consistently. So as we move on to the Giants next week, I would be looking for a really, really good defensive performance the entire time. I'm really excited.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think the last time we saw a Falcons defense perform like we did on Monday night. Like the closest example I can think of is maybe that early game against the Saints in 2010, I think it was, where that game that went into overtime.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, yeah, it's just you don't see this team being physical like they were, and really playing with that sort of edge to them, where it's like we are going to physically impose our will on you, and it's nice to see that. It's definitely a good thing to see that. Getting the crowd behind us, getting the home field advantage, and it'll be nice to see if they can carry that over onto the road because we know in past years they weren't a great road team, and they would kind of settle back to being mediocre on the road. And so I'm looking real excited to see what team shows up against the Giants this week on the road. Yeah. So speaking of that, how do we handle the Odell Beckham Jr. problem this week?
You put Trufant on him, and you have a deep safety with Ricardo Allen on every play, and pray.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to be realistic about where Trufant stands in terms of cornerbacks around the league, realistically, he's top 4 or 5 guys in the league right now. And I think that's a guy who can hang with. If you want to match him up with Odell Beckham, that's not really what Quinn's used to. He usually likes to have one guy on the left side of the field, one guy on the right side of the field. But if he decides to, all right, you're going to play a little bit more man on Odell Beckham, Trufant's a guy that can handle that responsibility. Odell Beckham, he didn't set the world on fire last week, but he's obviously a dangerous guy. I'm not really too worried. I think if you can slow down Odell Beckham, I really think it's not that difficult a game for the Falcons, at least defensively, because we clearly have an advantage in the trenches. Durant's going to get his. Warlow's much improved from last year. I really like the Falcons' defense matching up against the Giants' offense because I think they can slow down Odell Beckham, so I'm not really too concerned.
Wait. Did you say Warlow's improved?
Yeah, I did. I've been a big Warlow critic, but he definitely has looked improved since Quinn came. I'm happy for him, obviously.
I told you all he needed was a better scheme. I didn't have him doing all the bullshit that. I mean, what the hell was? I'm talked about all last year. Rob, I'm tired of it. So, yeah. What the hell was Mike Nolan doing having Warlow play man on man with tight ends? No fucking sense. Let him sit in the middle of the defense. Let him just play that middle zone, and he looks a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, the one thing I've noticed about the Giants defense, or Giants offense, I'm sorry, is the one thing that I think could give them a boost with Beckham. Is they will basically do a lot what I think Shanahan did with Julio, which is based off of what looks the defense is giving them will determine how they use Beckham. Like when watching the Giants-Seahawks game from last season, it was a lot of times when the Seahawks would go to cover one and have man up their corners on the outside, Richard Sherman being one of them, they would send basically Beckham on a go route and say, see if you can run with him, and we're throwing it deep. And that's nothing, throwing up a deep pass is nothing that Eli has ever sniffed his nose at. So that's one thing. And then when they would play cover 3, they would be more willing to have Beckham go over the middle and see if he could, find some soft spots in that in those zones behind those linebackers, between those linebackers. Obviously, the Seahawks have great linebackers. Obviously, the Falcons linebackers aren't on that level. So there is, for me, a minor concern right now that if that's basically what the Giants are going to do with Odell Beckham this week, if guys don't make tackles, Paul Warlow, Justin Durant, Corey Bierman, etc., if William Moore, is out there trying to, take dudes' heads off and misses a couple of tackles here and there, then you would have potential that Beckham could break a couple of big runs. It's not something that I'm super, super worried about, but it is something that, if the Falcons are in a close game, that could be the difference that could sort of swing things in the Giants' favor. But as Charles said, I don't really look at the Giants' offense and be like, oh, no, I got to worry. Like, they have, obviously they're not terrible, but it isn't one of those things that I feel like the Falcons can't match up. My big concern with this Giants game is whether or not our offense can go on the road and play well. That's something that we really haven't seen a lot over the years, and hopefully that changes under Kyle Shanahan. With Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan's numbers, I think, versus home versus away, basically he's like a 100 rating passer, generally speaking, at home, and he's like an 80 rating passer on the road. And I hope that changes. I hope, on a short week after a big win, this team doesn't have some sort of emotional letdown against the Giants and just kind of comes out there like they did last year against the Bengals and just not show up until the third quarter. So that's really my only concern. But from a physical standpoint, I think the Falcons are the better team. I think they definitely match up against the Giants. It's just really mentally, are they going to be, crisp? And I'm optimistic that Quinn is going to have them in that situation where they will be crisp, but we'll have to see.
Hope you're right.
Yeah. So, what do you guys attribute Julio's basic disappearance in the second half? Like I'm starting to get the feeling that he was nicked up, and so that does give me a little bit of concern this week. If Julio's not, if he's not 100%, he's facing a lot better corners this week in DRC and Prince Amukamara than he was last week. Now, obviously, the Giants' safeties are terrible. No offense to Landon Collins, who I like, but he has no business being in a situation where he's going to have to deal with Julio Jones or anything like that. And Brandon Merriweather is Brandon Merriweather. If you don't know by now how terrible Brandon Merriweather is in coverage, then you probably have been in a coma for the last 8 years. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on Julio's sort of not really being an impact player? Was that the Eagles making adjustments? Was there something up with him? Are you worried that bleeds over into this game against the Giants?
It was all the holding calls on the screenplays. There was like 4 different holding calls or OPI calls throughout the game, and almost all of them were in the second half. Julio was getting 15, 20 yards on screenplays, and then be called back because Roddy White had a OPI, or because Leonard Hankerson had a hold, or because Nick Williams had a hold. So you had these plays that were going to Julio that he was gaining yards, and then he'd be gassed because he just ran 40 yards down the field, and then they'd pull him out because they're like, well, he's gassed. He's already been running down the field all day.
Okay.
For me, it did kind of look like he was a little bit nicked up. I don't know exactly what happened, but you saw like on a few. The camera panned him on the sideline a few times, and there's a few times on the third down where I noticed that he wasn't in the game. But if it's nothing serious, I'm not that concerned about his performance for next week. I fully expect him to light it up again and have that be a recurring theme throughout the entire season. But he might have been a little nicked up. I'm not that concerned about it since there wasn't an official, big injury report or something like that. But I think he was nicked up last night.
Yeah. Obviously, it wasn't something that stopped him from playing, so obviously it wasn't super serious. But, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it yet. We'll wait till Wednesday's injury report comes out. So, let's see. So, I guess, Charles, How many sacks is Vic Beasley gonna have this week?
This week, 2. Because look, man, Eric Flowers went 9th overall, and to be realistic, he's terrible. Like he's got really slow feet in pass protection. His punch timing is all out of whack. He's very much a raw work in progress. Vic Beasley might get 2 sacks. Claiborne, he's gonna get his. Schofield's gonna go off. Here's a little prediction for me for the Falcons defense on Sunday. 5 sacks. 5 sacks. Beasley's getting 2. Beasley's getting 2. Claiborne's getting 1. I think Hageman gets his first sack of the season, and Schofield's going off for 1 too. I think we're really going to get after this Giants offensive line on Sunday, and I would not be surprised to see the defense produce a very, very dominant performance on Sunday. I'm really looking forward to seeing the defense in New York.
Leading up to the draft, I was told La'el Collins was going to be the pick at 9 for the Giants by pretty much everybody.
Right.
And when that thing came out the day before, they scrambled, panicked, shat their pants, and took Flowers. So I think Vic Beasley's going to destroy Flowers. He did it he basically did it in college, so I think we're going to see it again.
Right. And on Sunday night, before Randy Gregory went out for that injury, Gregory was literally just speed rush after speed rush after speed rush, just running around Eric Flowers. And Vic Beasley can do that at the same level as Gregory or better. So I really think this is a game Beasley gets his first sack. I'm excited for him.
And it's not like Richburg's a great football player either,
Right
at center. I'm excited. I think Claiborne's going to destroy the interior. He was good, but Schwartz and Richburg, I don't think they can handle the speed. And then Newhouse on the other side, I don't know if he can handle Schofield.
Yeah. I
don't think he's that good either. I mean, they don't have a lot of great football players on that Giants team. Outside of their fullback, Nikita Whitlock, I mean, that's my boy, man. He's like 5'7", 220 pounds in the NFL somehow.
Well, I like Nikita Whitlock, but he did replace like my 8th favorite player in Henry Hynoski, so he's enemy number 1. No one's better than Henry Hynoski.
Those are all main team names though.
All right. So, any other thoughts on this Giants matchup? Any other matchups you guys are looking forward to see? You think Tammy can toast Unga like Jason Witten did?
I mean, they've got Uani Unga. I probably butchered that name. J.T. Thomas and Devin Kennard. The only guy in that group that's anywhere sort of good is Kennard. And then DRC had a lot of trouble with Julio last time they played. Amukamura, he's just okay. I don't think DRC can match up with Julio. And because of that, I think they're going to have to rotate coverage, rotate pressure, and you're going to see Roddy a lot more open this week. As long as that defensive line, or the offensive line, I should say, holds up against their defensive line, Atlanta should have a very solid passing attack this week.
Yeah, for me, the only matchup I'd be a little bit concerned about would be, maybe the offensive line, but the Giants don't really have one threat on there. Jonathan Hankins, he's really the only guy that I'll be concerned about. Jake Matthews played really well on Monday night. He was good, and he was awesome in pass pro. He was really good in run blocking. I think Levitri's going to be fine against their defensive tackles. Hopefully Person gets a snap down. This is another game where Chris Chester is very familiar with the opposition. You know, he's coming from Washington where they have to play the Giants twice a season. So Chester's going to hold his own. I think Schrader's going to be fine. If they can keep Hankins in check, I think the running attack will do better than they did on Monday night. It's a lot easier of a challenge. You know, if we're being real, Fletcher Cox and Benny Logan are two of the best in business at what they're asked to do. So there's nobody really on the Giants' defensive line of that caliber. I'm expecting Tevin Coleman to probably get close to 100 yards. Maybe if Devonta Freeman can chip in another 40. I think it's going to be a good game on both sides for the offense and defense for the Falcons. I'm pumped, man.
Comparing the front seven of the Giants to comparing the front seven of the Eagles is like comparing the 2013 or 2014 Falcons front seven to the Eagles front seven we just played. Like, you're talking awful to one of the top 5 front sevens in the NFL. And Atlanta still had a very productive day on the ground against the Eagles.
Yep. It's a favorable matchup for the Falcons. It's certainly a sort of game that we could see, similar to that 2012 game where we shut them out 34-0. If the Falcons get going early, then it could all unravel for the Giants. They're not a very good football team. It's just a matter of whether the Falcons show up with that sort of hunger and determination, that fast physicality that Dan Quinn is preaching. So I'm looking forward to the game because I think this is another test. We had a big win. It's a short week. It's a road game. These fit the requirements for a trap game, and it'll be interesting to see if Dan Quinn, in his first potential trap game, can avoid the trap. So that's what I'm curious about. I really like the Falcons' chances if they can.
And if Dan Quinn can avoid the trap this week, this team's got a ridiculously high limit.
It's fair enough. All right. Let's answer some mailbag questions. We got a bunch. All right. First one comes in from Kevin Burris 14. He asks, do you feel that the Falcons won the game or did the Eagles lose the game?
Falcons won that game. They won it in the first half. And honestly, it should have been a bigger game than it was, because Atlanta lost 2 touchdowns in that first half from a stupid Ryan interception that was off the mark, and they had another play where Ryan was off the mark, and then they had to kick a field goal. If Ryan is on his game yesterday, it's probably 35-0 going into the half, or 35-3 going into the half. And it's not even close the second half. Yeah, you give up a lot of garbage time points and yards in the second half, but if you're up 35-3 and you wind up winning 42-24, you take it.
Yeah. I hate. I mean, I don't want to be rude, but I hate these questions. Like, the Falcons won that game yesterday. There was a point, leading into halftime, where they had led up the Eagles to 35 total yards. Like, the defense was on point, playing out of their minds. The Falcons definitely won that game, and I think if this is the Mike Smith era, maybe they lose that game in the second half. But they kind of let up a little comeback, but they showed the resilience that we hadn't really seen in the past, and they held on to the league, and we got the dub for the first week. And I was really proud, and I was really happy. The Falcons definitely won this game. The Eagles, they made a little comeback, but they lost. The Falcons won. I don't know.
It's always a little bit of both, but it's one of those things where, the Eagles came back. They almost had a game-winning field goal. They missed it. Obviously, you can sit there from one perspective. You can say, oh, well, the Eagles had a chance to win the game. They didn't, so they lost the game more so than the Falcons. But the Falcons won the game fair and square. They let the Eagles back into the game. I think that's a lot of that's a testament to how good a team the Eagles are. The Falcons aren't exactly this super deep team, and we saw our defense sort of tire out in the second half because of that. And I think you're not going to expect them to outplay a team as good as the Eagles are for 4 quarters. Did the Eagles put forth their A effort? No, but I don't think the Falcons really did either. So, yeah, the Falcons won the game. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, now that we saw how we and others played this weekend, does your record projections change?
Yeah, slightly. Mine goes up to an 11-5. Mainly because I wasn't expecting the Falcons to win this game this week. I was expecting those 10 wins to come later. Specifically this week against the Giants, because the Giants suck balls. But yeah, I thought this was going to be the first week for a win. And now that they've already got that first one under their belt, they could be 11-5, maybe even, dare I say, Aaron, 12-4. Let the homerism take over.
Oh, we had a Falcoholics little preview group roundtable, and I had the Falcons at 9-7. And you know what? After last night's win, I'm going to bump that up to 11-5. Like I said before, Philly's the only team that's really going to push tempo like that for 4 quarters, every play, no huddle. We're getting after it. But if that defense can sustain most of their drives this season like they did in the first half, this team's winning double-digit games, and they're easily the best team in the NFC South. It's not even close. So with that, I think 11-5 is an appropriate guess for this team. The defense is going to be very strong. If last night was an indication, this defense is going to kick ass this year, and I cannot wait to watch them.
Well, the reason why I keep saying 11-5, 12-4, we play 4 games against the AFC South and 6 games against the other teams in the NFC South. So right there, that could be 10 wins. I expect that to be at least 8-2, because the Colts look like hot shit. Just raw, unadulterated pile of crap against the Buffalo Bills. And Minnesota looked terrible. San Francisco, they might have an identity. I mean, the Falcons' schedule looks extremely easy from here on out, considering how horrible most of the teams on it played. Specifically the AFC and NFC South teams. The Panthers almost lost to the Jaguars. The Jaguars. Come on, man.
I had the Falcons at 9-7 going into the season. I think I previously had them at 10-6, but because of the offensive line issues, I kind of switched this Eagle game, from a win to a loss. So then it dropped them down to 9-7. With Dez Bryant out, I feel like that's a much more winnable game to the Falcons. I think I had the Falcons starting the season 2-4 because I figured the offensive line would be an issue these first couple of games. And then they would sort of, pick up steam and beat up on some of those softer teams on their schedule. But now it's one of those things where, I think it's much more realistic that they could start 4-2. So, if 9-7, 11-5. So I think it's much more realistic. I'm not going to sit here and say, based off of one game, now we'll see. Now if we stomp the Giants, then I'll definitely be much more willing to switch my prediction, but so
I'm just looking at how bad the schedule is. Indy looks like crap, Tampa Bay looks like crap, Jacksonville looks like crap. I mean, that's basically the second half of the schedule. New Orleans looks like crap. I mean, New Orleans is probably going to beat us in the Superdome because they always do, but that's whatever. Yeah, I mean, you've got so many different teams on the Falcons schedule that's just laid a giant rotten egg this week. I feel like San Francisco and Dallas are the two toughest games before the bye.
That may be true. I tend to be of the mindset that I don't tend to be overreactionary to week 1 or week 2 or really, basically, I'm a believer, wait till week 4 or 5 before you can really tell what a team is, as opposed to kind of saying, oh, well, the Falcons, like now, everybody's going to put the Bills in the Super Bowl because they beat the Colts. But it's like, the Patriots could beat them like 35-10 this week. And then they're like, whoa, what happened to the Bills? Or I don't know what happened. But so I just think people get way too overreactionary these first 2 games. Obviously, the Falcons showed a lot of good things in that week 1 game. If they continue to show it, then people are more than welcome to sort of, start jumping for joy and doing all the things that people want to do. But if they do what they did last year, where they started strong against the Saints and then completely laid a turd against the Bengals, who knows? I don't know. But it is what it is. We'll see what happens. I'm optimistic. Definitely more optimistic than I was 48 hours ago. Okay, we got another knee-jerk reaction question from Ben Asbury. Falcons' best case and worst case scenarios after 1 week of play.
Okay.
Worst case, they go 9-7. I'm just looking at the schedule. I don't see a way that unless Matt Ryan basically shits the bed all year, that the Falcons go anything worse than 9-7. Like unless Matt Ryan pulls an Eli Manning and throws 35 interceptions, they're not going 9-7, or they're not going to go worse than 9-7.
Yeah. The only way I see this team going less than 9-7 or 8-8 is if there's injury to Matt Ryan or Julio Jones. And even if Julio Jones gets hurt, I think Matt Ryan is going to pick up the slack from week 1, and the defense is going to be good enough where this team wins 9 games. So worst case scenario is probably 9-7 or 8-8. Best case, 12-4, 13-3, and get that first round bye going into the playoffs. Like, I don't know how far this team is going into the playoffs just yet, but this is definitely a team with the weakness of the NFC South as a totality that's going to get there, in my opinion. So at least at the worst, we're ending up with 500 record. At the best, this team is going to have a great record at the end of the season.
I'll go same lines with best case. I'm the pessimistic one, so I'll say the worst case, is probably injuries are really bad, then 6-10 or something like that. But if you're assuming that there's a reasonable amount of injuries, just a normal amount, whatever that means, then probably 8-8 is probably the worst case scenario. It's really just going to depend on that guy misses that particular game. This is a bad matchup because that guy missed that one game, or that sort of thing. So, but I agree with you guys. It's one of those things where this schedule is so soft that even if the Falcons do have an above average amount of injuries, they still should be able to win a bunch of these games in the second half of the season, particularly down the stretch, because they're not really playing anybody outside of the division that's really worth a damn. So it's something that we could definitely see the Falcons having a good season, even if things go wrong. All right, we got another one from Evan Birchfield. He asks, I was very impressed by DeMarco. What's one player that really stood out to all of you?
Ricardo Allen. He just looked good. He was flying all over the field. He played his deep third very well. And then he made that pick right at the end in the tip drill that just kind of sealed a really good day for him.
For me, it was Justin Durant. I think at the end of the day, he's going to have a chance to be a top 2 defender on this defense beside Desmond Trufant. And I thought outside of the third quarter where Sproles got him in coverage, I thought he had a really, really complete game. And I think he's going to solidify himself, barring injury, which he has struggled with in the past, but barring injury, I think he's going to solidify himself as one of the top 15 linebackers to play the game right now. Like, one of the top 15 linebackers in the game right now. And I think last night was a good step in that direction. I was really, really pleased with what Durant showed.
Yeah, Croy Bierman. No, I'm kidding. Matt Bosher. I'll choose Matt Bosher. I think punters don't get a lot of love. I think his ability to sort of flip the field a couple of times and sort of make the Eagles have to go the entire length of the field was really big for the Falcons and really sort of beneficial to the defense to get them in favorable situations. So Bosher's my pick. All right, the guy Scott just talked about, I guess Tyler Pulley wants us to go more in depth on why we think Ricardo Allen is such a stud.
He's quick. He's instinctual. He made good, solid tackles. He wasn't trying to knock anyone's head off, and in the end, he just made plays. At free safety, all you have to do is make some splash plays and don't let anything get behind you in the scheme, and he did a combination of both. He looked really good out there.
Yeah, same. I thought I thought he looked very natural at free safety. You know, it's funny because he got cut by the last regime, and then they brought him back on, and now he's starting at free safety, and he's making the game-winning interception. I was really pleased with him. You know, he looks very natural in coverage at free safety. He feels the run well for a guy his size. He's got good instincts. I think he's definitely good enough to start. He's probably going to be an above-average starter for the year. And yesterday was a great start for him. I'm really excited to see what he can do this season.
Yeah. You know, people probably forget that was his first regular season game, and to play as well as he did is really special. Why is he good? He takes good angles. He anticipates plays. He shows good awareness. He's playing faster and rangier than he ever really did at Purdue. You know, one of the issues, you look at Ricardo Allen, and it's really hard to sort of explain why he's been so good, because even myself, when he came out of Purdue, I was like, yeah, he's probably, if he was a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, he'd be a better safety prospect than a cornerback prospect. But even seeing that, it's one of those things where, like, I never envisioned him being as good as he has been this early in his career, you know, basically with how little experience he's had. You know, that's hard to explain. It's just, you know, he's one of those rare sort of exceptions where, you know, he defies all logic. You know, a 5'9", 185-pound former corner who has like 4.58 speed, you know, shouldn't be this good this early in his career. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, I stupidly, you know, thought Charles Godfrey would win the starting job, you know, prior to this summer, because it's just like, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for Ricardo Allen to be this good. But, you know, the proof is in the pudding. He's played outstanding football so far in the preseason. He was one of the better players on the field against the Eagles. Yeah, it's things are looking very much up, and, you know, really right now the only thing I think can stop him is, you know, durability issues. He's not the biggest guy. Safeties are notoriously injury-prone positions, but right now, you know, I was watching tape of Earl Thomas earlier, and I'm not saying he's Earl Thomas, but there are some plays that he makes that do remind you a lot of Earl Thomas, in small ways. So, you know, whatever he's been watching on tape to pick up on Earl Thomas, he is very much mimicking that very well for the Falcons right now. Okay. King Yele asks, can we start a GoFundMe to hire a PI so we can find out what Croy Bierman had on Dimitrov?
We probably should, because I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. What I don't get. I honestly don't even understand why they re-signed him in the first place. Like, besides like backup rotational Leo, I don't really even think he has a place in this team. He can't. He really can't be a strong side linebacker because the coverage responsibilities are just too much for him. I don't get it, man. I really don't. Um, he might have uh, some illicit photos of Dimitrov or something like that. I don't know how he's been able to stick around so long. He just doesn't make sense.
Well, I think maybe there's a possibility that Dimitrov was taking performance enhancers with Lance Armstrong, and Corey Bremer has the evidence that can sort of break that whole thing open. And Arthur Blank can't have another scandal like that on his hands. So maybe that's what he's got on Dimitrov. I'm not a Corey Bremer hater, but
Smoking a lot of weed.
I don't know. I agree with Charles. I think he's really a D end at this point. He's not really cut out to be a linebacker. But I don't think the Falcons really have right now much better options on the roster. So unless someone on the street can come in and show that they're better, then I think we're kind of stuck with him for another 5 weeks or whatever.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. All right, we got another one from King LA. Matt Ryan, just rusty with the underthrown balls? Question mark.
Well, like I said before, I think he's still kind of figuring out how to gel with his offense, and he didn't have a lot of reps in the preseason. I think a lot of it was just due to rust, but I think he's going to pick it up next week versus the Giants and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, quarterbacks can have bad games. It happens. He didn't play particularly well against the Packers in that Monday night game that people went crazy for. He had 4 or so almost picks in that game that Packers defenders dropped. So it's one of those things where I don't think Ryan has played particularly well since the Detroit Lions game, at least his usual standards. But I think Charles is right. You do have to cut him a little bit of slack. He hasn't, he had like 5 or 6 series in the preseason in a new offense. So got new receivers, new offensive line. So it's going to take some time. We'll see. Okay, we got basically another Matt Ryan question, so we'll skip that. Jalen Muhammad asks, thoughts on how the line and the running backs played last night?
They did a lot better than I was expecting. I mean, I wasn't expecting them to have anywhere close to 3 yards a carry, let alone I wasn't expecting them to have close to 2 yards a carry, let alone the 3, after how they played in preseason. And honestly, I thought they did a little bit better than what the stats showed, because they were getting a lot of positive yards. Coleman especially was getting positive yards on plays that he was getting hit in the backfield against a really good front seven. And I think when you go against the Giants this week, you might see them explode for 5-6 yards of carry against that horrible front seven they have up there.
Yeah, with the running game, I was pleased. Devontae Freeman, he didn't have his yards per carry was pretty low, but I thought he picked up some crucial yardage. And the Falcons, they have a good mix between Coleman and Freeman right now. They have Coleman who can pick up these outside zone plays and really stretch the defense thin and get in between the tackle and tight end and guard and tackle on those outside runs and explode through. And then they have Freeman who can get inside, between the guard and the center and on both sides. I think it's a really good combination. And Mike Person, the center, he's got to get a little bit better, but I thought Levitri played okay for his first start. Chester was above average. once Person settles in and figures how to snap, maybe he'll be okay. But I was really happy with the running game from both Coleman and Freeman. Obviously, Coleman was very impressive. He got the bulk of the carries and the yardage, but I thought Freeman did well for what he was asked to do.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I didn't pick the Falcons to win the game because I really did not expect them to be able to run the ball at all. I thought the final stat line would be like 14 carries for like 50 yards or something like that. So, what they did, they did pretty well. I don't know what their final success rate was, but I think I saw somewhere like Coleman was like 50% or something like that, which is exceptional against that Eagles front. So, very impressed with the offensive line and the running game, at least giving us some balance. I don't expect us to have, to be one of the top rushing teams in the NFL or anything, but if we can, be able to say we can get yards on the ground, we can get chunk yardage like we did on that draw play every now and then that's going to be good for the Falcons. And as long as they, we're not starting every drive on 2nd and 8 like we were the last like 3 years, because it would either, whether it was Turner or Jackson, that first down run, it was always just like a 2-yard run up the middle, and it was just like, okay, now we got to throw the ball on 2nd and 8, and then it's going to be an incomplete pass or whatever, and then it's it would just snowball. And this running game can keep the Falcons on schedule, and you can set up more 2nd and 5 and 2nd and 4s and whatnot. So very positive outlook for this running game moving forward. Okay, the next question, I think Charles just answered from Nick Pasqualoni. But we have from @Van Cruz, he asked, can Devontae ever win back the running back job from Tevin?
Probably. I mean, it wasn't really like at the start of the season. It wasn't really a position or a spot where there was going to be a clear guy. But I guess Coleman's going to be the guy to get 65% of the carries for the season. And if you can get Devontae to come in and run those inside zone plays like I stated before, that's fine. I don't really think Devontae needs to come in and take the bulk of the carries if Coleman's going to be averaging 4 yards a pop against a tough Eagles front seven. If Coleman's getting 4 yards a pop there, I think for the season he could probably average like 4.4, 4.5. Coleman's going to come in and get those inside zones, maybe average 4 yards a carry, 3.5, 4 yards a carry. I don't think Freeman's probably going to get the starting job back, but I think he still has a very crucial role in this offense, and that's fine.
You remember that role that Jacquizz Rodgers used to play where he was mainly the passing back? That's basically what we're going to see Devontae Freeman be. A bigger, faster, stronger Jacquizz Rodgers with slightly better vision.
Okay. I think there's a pretty decent chance that Devontae can win the job because I don't think there really is a starter. I think we saw this last year with Cleveland with Kyle Shanahan. They went with the hot hand. Like the season opener, Terrence West had 16 carries for 100 yards. And he didn't, I think he got the bulk of the carries for like the next 2 weeks. But by then, Kroll was out playing him, Tate was healthier or whatever. So I really think Shanahan's just going to go with the hot hand. So if Devontae plays better than Coleman does against the Giants, then I think you could see the Falcons starting Devontae against the Cowboys and vice versa. So I really do think it really doesn't really matter. Right now Coleman has the lead, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to outplay Devontae for the next 15 games. So I do think there's a decent chance that, a week or two from now, Devontae's going to be the starting tailback. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter because they're going to split reps and both guys are going to get involved. So, yeah. Okay. We got Evan Birchfield. He asks, any noticeable differences on how Julio was used in the past compared to last night?
It seemed like a combination of malarkey and cutter schemes. You had a combination of the screens, you had those short slants, you had him going deep, you had him running wheel routes. They basically said, what can Julio do? And said, oh, he can do everything, so let's have him do everything. And they just said, hey, get open on this route. And he was open, so they threw him the ball. He's the primary guy, and he was used like a primary guy last week. It wasn't Roddy with Julio as the backup. It was Julio with Roddy as the number 2.
Yeah, I agree. In this game, they said in the preseason, Kyle Shanahan had plans for Julio to play all over the formations for the Falcons, and that's what he did. He was playing X, Y, Z slot. He was all over the field, running every type of route that you can imagine, and I was, I was happy, and I think from last year and from years previous, I think his route running has improved. Like you can see on that touchdown he had right before the half where he smoked Byron Maxwell. He's developing a little stutter step to his game to fake out defensive backs so he can gain a little bit more separation for himself. And if Julio Jones improves his route running, we already know that he has all-time great athleticism to make the most out of his passing game. And I really expect him to solidify himself as possibly the top receiver in the game by the end of this season. He's going to have a massive year, and I think last season was just the first step in that. Last night, excuse me.
Yeah, I think the main difference is moving him around a lot more. I think under Cutter and Malarkey, I think oftentimes they would just kind of line him up on the left side of the offense and just kind of take what the defense would give him, and a lot of that was bracket coverage. And I think the difference between what Shanahan is doing, and I don't necessarily know if he did a ton of it on Monday night, but I think we'll see more of it going forward, is sort of moving Julio around to sort of prevent teams from being able to basically have a very basic sort of thing. Okay, we'll slide our safety over to that side of the field, and that'll prevent the deep ball to Julio and whatnot, and we'll man up on the other side. And I think Shanahan won't let teams sort of fall into that sort of mode, I guess, with basically being able to predict what the Falcons are going to throw at them by moving Julio around a lot. So, yeah, I think that's the major difference. I think it'll really also depend on certain matchups. And I think certain teams will be able to put better corners on Julio than what the Eagles can muster, and that will also dictate how the Falcons use him and force them to move him around a little bit more as well. Okay, at Hard Act to Follow. I can't even talk. Hard Act to Follow. Why do you guys think that Nick Williams was activated over Justin Hardy?
Special teams. Justin Hardy's not a great tackler as a gunner. He's not a great special teams player unless he's a returner. So you put Nick Williams in there, who that's how he made the roster, and that's what you do. Now this week I don't think it's going to matter because they cut Charles Godfrey, and they're probably going to throw Hardy or Desmond Southwood out there depending on who they want to do. But that's why you make Hardy a backup.
Yeah, with Scott, special teams, Hardy hasn't shown much that he's going to go down and make tackles in special teams. I don't think it's a big deal for week 1. If we're still getting to the situation where he's inactive middle of the season, I'd be concerned, but I'm not looking into too much at week 1.
Yeah, I kind of thought this would happen, but I thought it would be because they would have Williams returning instead of Weems. But Keith Armstrong's a great coach, but sometimes he makes decisions that you're like, why did you make? I don't understand that decision. And so the question is, why did they activate Williams over Hardy if he wasn't going to return kicks? I don't know. My guess is, and this is purely speculation on my part, is they wanted to have the option. They didn't really make the decision between Weems or Williams who was going to return until maybe Monday night, until the game actually started, and they're like, "Well, Weems, you do it," and that but they wanted to have Nick Williams out there just in case. Hardy, I know he had the big return in preseason, but I don't think his sort of abilities as a punt returner really translate to the NFL particularly well because he's not very explosive out of his cuts, which you kind of have to be a good punt returner. I think Williams was better than him in the preseason, so I think that's why Williams was getting the nod over Hardy there. But as Charles said, yeah, it's going to be, once Hester gets back, assuming, people kind of assume that once Hester is healthy, Williams is probably going to get cut and go in a practice squad. Then you're going to see, okay, is Hardy then going to be active as the fifth wide receiver? And if so, then, what player isn't going to be active? So we'll see how it plays out. But, no, this first game, it's not a big deal. All right, at Mabe2124 asks, so how long is Person at center? Those center snaps were killing me last night.
If he keeps snapping it like he is, I'm going to give him 2 weeks. If he learns how to snap, he'll make it through the season. Even then, I still think the Falcons take a center in the second or third round in this upcoming draft and make him the long-term Nick Mangold, trying to think of who else is a long-term center, Alex Mack. There's not really many franchise centers out there, but Todd McClure, hopefully you can find the next Todd McClure out there.
Yeah. If Person keeps fucking up the snaps like he has been, he's not going to stay there long. I don't really know where else they're going to find a center at this point, but Person's got to get those snaps under control, and he's got to get better with his hands in regards to making these reach blocks. And it wasn't a great performance, but I do think he's going to get a little bit better as he settles into that center role. I think part of the mishaps on his end were more due to uncomfortability than overall talent level.
And then hopefully after this season, Nick Martin's there in the second round, and Atlanta can just take him. Guy out of Notre Dame.
I don't know. How long is Person going to be center? Could be 1 week. It could be 15 weeks. It just depends on how he plays. I think that's one of the reasons why the Falcons made the moves that they did. They want to have options in case guys don't maintain their level of play, and they'll pull the plug on guys. And I think Person's on the hot seat. I think Schrader's on the hot seat. So we'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Big Boy Brewski asks, matchups you all want to see against the Giants?
I want to see Vic Beasley versus Eric Flowers. I think that's an exciting rookie matchup. Vic Beasley was eighth in the draft, Eric Flowers in ninth in the draft, so that's automatically a high-profile matchup right there. And I want to see Soliai, Heyman, Tyson Jackson, Adrian Claiborne versus the Giants guards. So in the trenches is where I'm looking for the most.
I'm excited to see the offensive line of the Falcons take on the mediocrity that is the defensive line of the Giants. Because if they can push them around, they can probably push the Saints. They can probably push the Buccaneers around later in the season. So those, to me, are the comparative lines. If you can push around the crap that is the Giants, you can push around the crap that is the Saints or the Bucs. They've got that one good player and then a bunch of other shitty ones around.
I want to see Desmond Trufant against Odell Beckham. I want to see how that goes. That's going to be something fun to watch. Two great players going head-to-head. There can only be one winner.
And if Eli Manning's on his back, who can he throw it to?
There you go. All right, we got two more. First one is from Chief Gonzalez _5 with a planned balanced attack to 26, Tevin Coleman, rush for 1,200 plus yards this season, over or under?
That seems realistic. If he can maintain and if the offensive line can improve throughout the year, that does seem like a realistic number for him. He's not going to put up 2,000 yards like he did in college every year, but 1,200 yards consistently year in, year out is very, very possible for him. And if he does that, the Falcons will be winning a lot of games.
Yeah, I think 1,200 yards. I think that's a goal for him. If he can get 80 yards versus the Eagles, who I mean, the Fletcher Cox and Benny Logan, they play pretty well versus run for the most part. If he can get 80 yards versus the Eagles, I wouldn't be surprised to see a few 100-yard games sprinkled in there. I think 1,200 yards is a very realistic goal, and I think that probably is the goal for him. Over under, maybe a little bit under, like 1,100 yards. Which seems realistic with Freeman taking some carries from him, but I think he's definitely passing 1,000 yards this year. So I'm excited to see him, just like I'm excited to see the rest of his team. I think this is going to be a really positive year for the Falcons.
Well, once again, I'm the negative guy. I'm going to take the under. I just don't see him getting the amount of carries, the volume of carries he'll get over the course of 16 games this year with a guy like Freeman pushing him to get 1,200 yards. Now, if he's one of those guys that breaks a 50-yard run every week, then he'll be able to rack up yardage, even if he's only splitting carries. But it's one of those things where I would be shocked if any one of these running backs for the Falcons this year get over 200 carries. So it's one of those things where, if to get 1,200 yards, you basically got to get like 250 carries. And I just don't see that happening unless the Falcons is absolutely just every game they're able to run the ball 30 or 40 times because their defense is so great and they just build up early leads and basically can just run the ball for the final three quarters. But I do think maybe 1,000 might be a little bit more realistic, but I think he'll probably come in somewhere around 800 or 900 yards this season. Now in the future, I think he can get 1,200 because I think he'll get more opportunities as he gets older and gets more time to develop in this offense. But this season, I think breaking 1,000 would be a very good thing, certainly, but I don't see it in the cards. All right, last one is from Jelani234. Timeline for Brooks Reed's return.
Hopefully it's only a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, a month would be ideal, maybe a little bit longer. I think if they roll Schofield for the most part at strong side linebacker, they'll be fine. So I'm not too worried about it right now.
Yeah, I guess the target is that Thursday night game against the Saints in Week 6, but that's a short week. So I guess the following week against the Titans would probably be the better case if he missed the 6 weeks that they were predicting. And I don't know. You never know with these growing injuries, especially since this is one that he's dealt with for the last year, pretty much. So it's one of those things where I hope he comes back in like 5 weeks or whatever, but it wouldn't shock me if we don't see him till after the bye week. I hope that's not the case, but obviously if it was easy for him to heal from this groin injury, he would have done it by now. So we'll see what happens. All right, folks, that is our show. We appreciate Charles for joining us this week again. Charles, you're writing stuff for the Falcoholic. You got anything down the pipe?
Yeah, after we get off here, I'm going to start writing my film review for the Falcons-Eagles game, which should be up on Wednesday or Thursday. And that's about it for right now. But happy to be at the Falcoholic. It's a great place.
You can follow Charles on Twitter at McDraft2. I'm sure we will be seeing much of Charles, and if you're not following him yet, definitely follow him on Sunday for that moment where Vic Beasley gets his first sack. His reaction will be pretty interesting. Yeah, follow Scott on Twitter. He's at Karasik PFS. I am at FalcFans. Scott is doing stuff for Pro Football Spot. I'm doing stuff for FalcFans.com. Follow the show at Falcons PFC. Follow, we're trying to get that iTunes feed back up at Pro Football Central. So I know some of you guys complain about that. So that should be going strong during the regular season now. And if you want to have your question answered on next week's show, we will be talking about the Giants. Recapping the Giants, and we'll be previewing the hated Dallas Cowboys. Use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag, and it'll be easier for us to find your questions. And that's it, everyone.